What's up,
Hi.
you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm absolutely honored to introduce you all to satanic ritual abuse, sex trafficking, and Harvey Weinstein survivor and whistleblower, acclaimed actress, artist, and painter, and an absolutely brilliant woman who has risked her life to shine a light on the darkness of her life and the lives of other victims and survivors, Paz de la Huerta. A little bit about Paz and what we will be talking about today. In the glittering yet treacherous shadows of Hollywood, where dreams collide with darkness, Paz emerges as a beacon of unyielding resistance, a survivor who has transformed unimaginable hell into a powerful call for justice and artistic rebirth. Born on September 3rd, 1984, in New York City, Paz's life has been a whirlwind of triumph, trauma, and tenacious comeback, proving that even the most shattered spirit can rise, reclaim its voice, and inspire millions to fight for truth. The daughter of a women's rights activist mother, who we will be referring to as Judith today, and a Spanish duke and rancher father descended from nobility, Paz grew up in the artistic heart of Tribeca. From a young age, her world was steeped in creativity and privilege. Her mother rented apartments at 311 Greenwich Street, including one to Miramax during Paz's teenage years. But beneath the facade lay profound struggles. By 14, Paz had already launched her acting career, earning acclaim for her role as Mary Agnes in The Cider House Rules in 1999, a Miramax production. Her raw talent shone through, stealing scenes and earning her a scholarship to the prestigious St. Anne's School, where she graduated with one of the highest IQ scores in its history. Classmates included famous luminaries, and Paz's intellect matched her striking beauty. Yet, as her parents divorced amid custody battles, Paz's mom hid her from her father and his doctor during filming, a pattern of control that escalated into exploitation. Paz's ascent continued with films like A Walk to Remember and the HBO series Boardwalk Empire, where she captivated audiences and became a focal point of season 2. Her performances were electric, blending vulnerability with fierce sensuality, earning her comparisons to sirens of old Hollywood. Off screen, however, Paz endured horrors that tested her soul. In 2010, at a Golden Globes after party for Blue Valentine, Weinstein, who produced the film, forced his way into her Greenwich Street apartment and raped her, repeating the violent assault weeks later. These attacks, amid relentless harassment from Weinstein's assistants, shattered her, leading to addiction as a coping mechanism to the extreme trauma imprinted on her from then on out. The trauma compounded in 2011 on the set of Nurse 3D, where a stunt vehicle struck Paz, dragging her 10 feet and causing severe injuries. Surgery by neurosurgeon Aaron Filler in 2013 relieved the pain, but he later inflicted a brain injury on her in 2016 amid lawsuits. Her health spiraled. Overdoses, miscarriages, one even induced by a handler, and false hospitalizations orchestrated by her mother and her godmother. Paz has shared heartbrokenly that her mother, Judith, trafficked her to Weinstein, spied on her via connected apartments, and stole her earnings, leaving her penniless while living lavishly. Yet Paz's spirit refused to break. In 2017, as the Me Too movement erupted, she bravely spoke to the New York Times and Vanity Fair, exposing Weinstein's assaults.
Well, that whole time I had the brain injury and they were
Yes.
drugging me. So it was, and the people that put Weinstein in my life were still in control of me, and all the lawyers were corrupt and the journalists, and they covered up my family's crimes. So I speak about that in my TikTok.
Though her case wasn't part of his conviction, Paz's testimony fueled the reckoning, inspiring survivors worldwide. Her art became her
Well, they
salvation.
wanted to make sure I would never testify because given the chance to testify, I would have put my mother in jail. I'm Christina, yeah. So,
100%.
you have to understand, I say it in my TikTok, there's a difference between being crazy, there's a difference between being a drug addict, and there's a difference between being injured. I was injured and being financially handicapped by CRM management, Judith and Christina. It was all about control. And as long as they had control over me, they could control the narrative. And they didn't want people to know the truth. So they defamed me and gaslighted me in the media for years. But I was injured. You have to understand, I don't have mental illness.
No.
I don't have one pill in my system now. They wanted to run a story in the media that I was a drug addict, which wasn't true. My mother had started drugging me as a child. My father started giving me alcohol as a child to make me vulnerable to their abuse. And then anyway, go on, sorry.
No, you're so right. And
Yeah.
people also
I
don't
just
understand.
want to note that it's very important that we
Mhm.
expose because, you know, the Me Too movement that happened against Harvey Weinstein, all those journalists, none of them. And I've made points now that I've been safe and nobody can say I'm crazy anymore, of writing journalists like Jodi Cantor to say I'm ready to tell my real story. And I almost do it as a test to see how corrupt this really was. Because given my mother's cover up that she works for the United Nations for girls, we don't know how many people were involved in covering up their crimes. I was injured. 300 milligrams of Seroquel, 2016 brain injury, took me 7 years to recover from. I only took, and that corrupt psychiatrist put me on lethal amounts of medication alone that could have killed me. So it's a miracle I'm alive, like a million times over, Anyway, go on.
I couldn't agree more with you. You are a
Yeah.
walking miracle.
Yeah, thank you.
Paz's work helps her process her pain, with pieces exhibited and sold globally. And films like Puppy Love, where she won festival awards while in the midst of processing and experiencing extreme trauma, showcase her enduring talent. But her story isn't just survival, it's a rallying cry. Quote, I've been through hell, but I've remembered everything. We are all angels. These exploiters are Satanists, and I deserve justice. Unquote. Paz's life is a testament to unbreakable fortitude. From Rebecca Streets to Hollywood heights and depths, she reminds us that truth, art, and courage can conquer even the darkest lies and crimes. As she rebuilds, acting, painting, and advocating, Paz inspires us to speak out, heal, and reclaim our power. The siren survives, and her voice echoes eternally. So, you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, overcomer and thriver, courageous whistleblower, survivor and survivor rights activist and advocate, justice seeker, passionate purveyor of truth, and absolute walking miracle, the one, the only, Paz de la Huerta. It is an honor to
Oh,
have you
that's
on
so
today, Paz.
sweet. Thank you, Emma. Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I'm really grateful to have you. I have heard your story years ago when it had made headlines, and then it seems like there really was a cover up with your story because you didn't hear about it for a little bit, and you're starting to reemerge. You've been talking out all this time, but you started a TikTok, you've started speaking out more, and you're continuing your efforts to expose this evil that has surrounded you, not just your whole life, but with this scandal that you should have really been a part of and received the justice for already. So I wanted to get into your story a little bit because even though what some people may have heard your name with headlines with Harvey Weinstein, your story actually started way before that. And Harvey was far from your only perpetrator or violator. And so I thought we'd start in your childhood and maybe paint the picture of who your family were, who your parents were, and get into what your childhood was like.
Yeah, well, my father is Ricardo de la Huerta, right? Inigo. And he comes from the Spanish aristocracy. His title is the Duke of Mandas de Villanueva. And my mother is Judith Bruce, who was born in Minneapolis. And what can I say about my childhood? I read your questions and you talked about the programming stuff. I think that started really early on. You know, I remember I was obsessed with the movie Sleeping Beauty, right? And I think in weird ways, you know, it got into my subconscious, you know, all these old fairy tales. I took a course once at the new school, the history and the philosophy of fairy tales. And the real story of Sleeping Beauty is a princess whose father, the king, comes into her bed and rapes her while she's asleep. That's the real story. And that's what was really happening to me, incest. So this started very young. It started very young. I would say 5 years old. Um, my family had a country home in Southampton. First, we lived in Soho at 421 West Broadway, and then the ranch in Spain. And, you know, only you didn't mention it in your intro, but I've only been safe for 5 years. 5 years ago, I was put in a cheap hotel in Madrid by my family, a grown adult, brutally, repeatedly raped for a year by my father and other men. So, you know, you can only imagine how much I have to heal from. So, but it started at that age. So let's say five. And, you know, only until recently, if I see pictures of myself, you know, my father is, I think if I could compare my father to anyone in history, it would be the Marquis du Sade. Okay. You know, and he's my father is a lunatic, but in many ways, Judith is worse. Um, on the ranch alone, I think this kind of satanic abuse is in the history of my family. You know, I have now devoted my life and my time into my healing and to my spirituality. And within that, I've figured out a lot of things. For example, I think my Aunt Corina was abused by my grandfather. I have a photograph of me as a little girl in my aunt's bed at 5 years old. And what's really perverse is, you know, I only was with, you know, I hadn't, the incest with my father only took place 5 years ago, right? And what I noticed was that he kept these pictures of me around his bed in his girlfriend's apartment. One of me as a 5-year-old girl in bed with the face of terror on my face, okay? Just terror. And it looks like he's, you know, it's just a picture of me like this. You know, maybe I'll put it in one of my TikTok videos. You can see how scared I am. And they even had tunnels on the ranch, and I'm not joking. There was a tunnel that went from one, like my aunt's room, and then I would go down the stairs and go into my father's room in the middle of the night. And it started very young, the abuse, you know, and it involved alcohol. You know, he started to give me alcohol at a very young age, and he you know, he sexualized me, let's just say. He treated me like a girlfriend. You know, he bought me very pretty clothes. um and he was a very rich man. So, you know, he showed me off like a girlfriend. And then my mother, it's very simple if you want to break down the psychology of why all these horrible things happened to me. My mother was jealous, right? Yeah, because I was getting all the attention. And that never changed. And honestly, that pattern in my life hasn't changed much, even now. And I honestly think, you know, I've said it in other interviews, there are good women. I have female friends, but the abuse that I endured that traumatized me the most was by women, because all my traffickers were women. But oh, sorry, I'll get back to your question. So my childhood. So the abuse with my father started very young on the ranch in Spain. and also all over the world, because we had a lot of money and the luxury to travel. So, you know, in New York, I remember we would stay at the Carlisle Hotel, you know, and I would just, you know, here I am as a child wanting to go. I went to Grace Church School, and I would sometimes sleep at that hotel, and my dad would be drunk and do things to me, and I think I just disassociated, you know, trauma response. And I would scream, and then security would come and he'd give them money and they'd go away. And that's been the story of my life.
Oh,
This is why I have a very hard time trusting people. So that started as a child. You know, my family has paid off lawyers, film companies, managers. Um, a lot of people will do anything for a dime. So it started that young that I remember. I'll give you an example. I remember one thing that happened. I'll never forget this. I was, you know, maybe 11 years old. I had been at the Carlisle with my dad. He was abusing me. I screamed. The security guard came and he gave him a bunch of money. And the security guard went away. And then I managed to get the door open and I ran to the street to flail a cab to go to school. And I remember I saw the security guard outside and I said, "Why didn't you help me?" And he said, "Kid, it's going to get a lot worse." This, that was my childhood. And then, you know, my sister, you know, I was born with some great gifts in my life: beauty, um, talent, kindness.
you're so artistic too.
I'm a painter. I started painting as a really little girl, and I think with my paintings, I always saw things more clearly. I was never safe. The first thing I started painting as a child were interior design. I was obsessed with interior design, and I think and my doll houses, because I think I was trying to create safe spaces for myself because I wasn't safe. You know what I mean? So that's what it was. And then, you know, my dad would get drunk, and then Judith. I mean, Judith is just the most, however evil my father is, and if I compare him to the Marquis de Sade, that means the man is the devil. Judith is, who could I compare her to? The mother in Carrie. I mean, this woman, I mean, they're all narcissists. These people have no conscience, and they're power hungry, and they're greedy. So, and my sister, I had a sister, jealous. She was jealous of me. Yeah, you know, she used to beat me up, you know, scratch my face, and there was no one to run to because nobody wanted to protect me. You know, and that is the sad truth. That's the sad truth. Nobody fucking protected me. My animals, actually, this is why I have so many animals. You know, I think my animals, you know, I even now I have to sleep with dogs. It's a trauma response because he would come into bed while I was sleeping. And then even my mother sexually abused me, and that started happening on Greenwich Street because we moved from Soho to Greenwich Street. And I would have nightmares. I would be traumatized, and I would, you know, I wish I had had more honest therapists in my life, because the thing about these horrible exploiters was, like you mentioned, you know, it was all about control. And as long as they had control over my finances and my life, they would not be exposed. And I remember, you know, I would go into my mother's bed, but this woman is depraved. I mean, she hates herself. This woman hates herself so much that she dedicated her whole life, quite literally, to wanting to not just ruin mine. Let's be very serious. You've seen my TikTok videos. affidavit, my mother put a hit on my life, okay? Who do you think was behind the truck hitting me? Who do you think was behind the brain injury? Who do you think was behind all this madness? Judith. This woman, I think if she was ever really convicted of all her crimes made against me, would serve more than prison. And, you know, this is depravity at its greatest. My father, you know, I think he has a bit more of a conscience. Like, he drinks a lot, and I think he drinks a lot because he knows he's done something terrible. But he's still evil. It's not like he protected me either. And then Christina, you know, this woman is as depraved as Judith, because she not only, you know, tapped her mother's phone lines, but out of jealousy, because her mother was a very beautiful, glamorous woman, you know, just enjoyed spending money to hurt me, you know. There needs to be a very big investigation. There's an investigation in France now. Things are happening in New York. I can't say everything, but, you know, the police are looking into things, and things are happening in Spain. But my childhood started like that. It was, you know, but I think a positive is that you know, who I was as a person was light. I still have my light after all this. You know, wanted to paint, dance, sing, you know, but they were all jealous. And then I think they saw dollar signs. Yeah.
Which is horrific, because no child should have to deal with a parent who, you know, not just abusing you, but you had parents who are actually jealous of you. Children don't even have a conceptualization of what jealousy is. They just want to play and be happy and, you know, be comforted by their parents when things don't go wrong. And really, everywhere you went, like you said, you had not a single adult that intervened in your childhood to try to keep you safe. Everybody was involved. It was a big circle around you, including with your sibling, who even took on the jealousy, probably because she was, you know, copying your mom and how your mother treated you, which is really sad.
Yeah,
and I know I've heard you say.
And then the bullying also happened in school. I was bullied in school. And then, you know, I had wanted to act because I wanted to make money to get away from the family. But the sad truth, and this is where the CRM management came into my life, 1997, they were a part of the problem. I never saw my money. Judith was in control of all the finances, and I was being used. I was being used, and I was being trafficked. But you know, after Soho in New York, we moved to Greenwich Street, and Weinstein lived on Greenwich Street. And I've been speaking to a really interesting girl lately. Her name's Ryan, who's psychic and knows about these things. And she told me that she thinks people bid on me, like bid on me. You know what I mean? So Weinstein probably, you know, I think what happened was I was walking down the street, and I think Billy Hawkins had his office there, and he caught eyes for me, you know, and, you know, Judith now denies that Miramax ever even rented 3B. Well, I have an email that she doesn't know I have, which I read on my TikTok, which she says in her own words that she was afraid of me speaking to the press because they had rented the 3B apartment to Miramax in the early 90s, which is when I made the Cider House rules. And I posted that picture. You have the back, you have the see-through glass door. And then, you know, I remember who was there. It wasn't Weinstein in there. It was someone that worked at Miramax. I believe his name was Mark. And they spied on me. He got a view of a very beautiful 13-year-old girl going through puberty.
Explain a little bit about what those 3 rooms looked like for people to visualize it.
Okay, so it was kind of like a train track, you know, so you have, you know, like, you know, now she sold the 3B apartment, and in 2017, and in later TikTok video, I will post those police photos. She built walls when the police came in 2017 to cover up her crimes and sold the apartment. But that email I have says everything, and the Tina Barney photo. So you have the see-through glass door, there's 3B, then 3C is in the middle, and then 3D. So see-through glass door enters into 3B. Mind you, the blinds to that apartment were not on my side of the door, but on the side of Miramax's. So all he had to do was lift the blinds, no privacy, and they were connected. So mind you, not even a blind. I didn't have a blind, no privacy. Here I am in the hallway in a sleigh bed, mirror here, and then there's a glass door, and that's rented to Judith's apartment, right? And it's interesting speaking to this girl, Ryan, and I believe she's right. I believe Judith watched them watch me, because this woman is really depraved. When I mean depraved, like I had no privacy. She would always go through my underwear. She would, I once had a dildo. I mean, that's normal. I was discovering my sexuality, but this woman hates herself so much. And here she has this gorgeous daughter that she's jealous of, that her husband's in love with. So she wanted to sell me like a fucking whore, which she did. But I think, what's interesting, what Ryan said is that, these people are into blackmail. Like everyone's aware of the Epstein files and this and that. I think Judith blackmailed these people, and I think they blackmailed her. And I certainly was blackmailed, more than blackmailed. Had my life threatened. So, that's how that started. So that's how the spying, and I really hope, I'm speaking to police in New York now. I hope, you know, I want this to be over. I want to get on with my life. It, it's so horrifying. Some days I just wake up crying, you know. And then the CRM management got involved with the finances, and I never saw my money, and Judith is so greedy, so greedy. I didn't get any love, none. I was just used.
Well, and you see as a child how you're so traumatized from everything you're going through at home. So you turn to art as this way to process, to decompress, something to take your mind off things, an outlet. And so you get into all these different ways to express yourself through singing, through acting, through your paintings, through writing even, and then all your mother realizes, and father, I'm sure, how talented you are. And like you said, they see dollar signs. And so they're even taking your outlets and trying to make money off of them and trying to turn what you're doing into a way that benefits them, which is extremely sad. What age did you start getting into, I guess, the more professional side of acting?
Well, it happened. I just explained it to you. I think I was bid on, I was casted in the Cider House Rules at 13 years old. That's a professional movie. That's Miramax.
And that one was your first one?
Well, I think before that I did Luminous Motion. But yeah, my big break was a Miramax movie. Miramax is Weinstein's company.
And I've heard a lot in talking to different people that have been through satanic abuse and different real extreme abuse and organized crime and abuse. Bidding and auctioning children is a really big thing in these networks. They have a lot of money. They have a lot of ways to hide what they do, and they do the most depraved, disgusting, and heinous things at the expense of children with the money and resources that they have. It's a perfect breeding ground for predators to get together and do nasty things.
Yes, and they did. I believe I was auctioned off, and and everybody profited off me. I mean, I've been reading on my TikTok like all these insane emails that they don't know I have. I was told by someone when I finally got safe 5 years ago to print out a hard copy of my timeline, to print the statements out, and to put it in the safe. because they had been hacking my email since I was a little girl. And I also have, had people get some, every time I would get a lawyer, these people have a lot of money. So they just assumed anyone would get paid off. But I've had a few lawyers that wouldn't get paid off that saved their crazy emails and gave them to me. And all you need to do is see the people copied on these emails. And it's just heartbreaking. This woman, Victoria Faust, even a writer who wrote an article, people, they wanted my money or their money. It was about money. And these people went horrifying lengths to hurt me. No
Yeah,
conscience,
you.
no conscience whatsoever. So, you know, um, and when I see the people copied and I look back at the earlier time in my childhood, like when I saw that Victoria Faust was copied, oh, that hurt at first, because this was a woman when I was a child who I would never feel safe at home. So I'd run away to her home and look for a mother. And then to realize that she was always a part of it too.
Oh
She
my
was
God.
profiting off me and didn't care about me. I mean, the thing about, I want to know, I personally don't like the women in the Me Too movement, besides one French actress, Fahina Giocante, who was a victim of her father as well. She's secure in herself. She's very beautiful. She's a talented actress. I was in a movie with her. I don't want to be a perpetual victim. I have talent. I paint. I model. I act. But I can't turn my back completely on what's taken place. And I can't not stop fighting for my justice. Alone, they stole a lot of money. And I need resources to heal. I'm traumatized.
Absolutely. And you deserve that. You shouldn't have to worry about them taking clothes and taking your finances and they're taking your entire agency so you can never be independent. That's the thing. They
Oh,
want
well,
you to always have to
that's what
depend on
they
them.
did. They wanted to make sure I would never be free so I could expose them. And they took away my voice. They took away my voice completely. That's why I had to keep my Instagram private, which is how I even got my voice back as much as I did. Um, and I mean, it's so it's so horrifying. And it took me a long time because, it was all about intimidation, to intimidate me to not go to the police, to keep me scared, you know. And I had one ethical therapist, Michael Rebel, who had told me for millions of years, run away. You go back there, you're a dead woman. You
Oh,
know, he was like a real friend, someone who really cared. Everyone else just saw dollar signs, like, oh, let's take money to hurt Paz. And it was just so horrifying that, very few people wanted to protect me or even tried. You know, um, I'm not sounding vain, but as a beautiful woman and a talented woman, I attracted a lot of envy. I still do. And, it almost seemed like these people enjoyed hurting me. And, um, I used to say they would try to find women that were jealous and men that if they couldn't have me wanted to destroy me.
how did you
So,
cope with all that so young? Because you were very successful in everything that you did, whether it was art or acting or school, having such a
well,
high
that's the
IQ.
horrible thing. I coped by creating. I
Yeah.
coped by creating. But then I found myself, but I wasn't living, I wasn't happy. If you look at all my roles, I mean, I played in the Cider House Rules an orphan, a very sad orphan, you know, and, very sexual, overly sexual. I don't think there's anything wrong with being beautiful. I don't think there's anything wrong with being sexual or sensual. What was wrong is how my family exploited it for money.
Yes.
You
Did you
know,
experience that same type of exploitation taking advantage of you in your jobs working in Hollywood with Miramax? Did you experience any of that
Well,
on
yeah,
set?
I mean, the whole career was trafficking to Weinstein. And then
Right.
when I started to speak out, I started to, you know, I, I went to a journalist long before the Me Too movement. I want to note that. I've been reading statements on my TikTok that prove that. I got fired from Boardwalk Empire, blackmailed into making Nurse 3D, and I got hit by a truck. That truck hitting me was not an accident. It was an assassination attempt by Weinstein, by my mother, and by my family, by my father. Okay, my therapist, Michael, before he died, left behind recordings explaining who wanted to hurt me and why. I've been living in hiding, basically like a witness protection program the past 5 years. Okay, I have high security email that if it was hacked already, I'd be dead. You know, the last time Judith's lawyer contacted me was only November 11th. And this is how manipulative and insane this woman is, just to give you an example. Oh, your mother still loves you and wants to send you money, but we need somebody to send it to, right? The world knows I have a GoFundMe. Anyone can anonymously send money. No, she's this depraved that they're still trying to track me down. I read the statement that she offered my best friend James Orlando money to give up my location and divulge to him that she put a hit on my life. I watched my TikTok videos. When you watch them, read the statements. Listen to what yeah. It's horrifying. So I have to worry about I will probably have to worry about my safety the rest of my life unless they really lock her up immediately. And my father and Christina and all of their employees. I get death threats. I get emails that say Paz de la Muerta. It's not a joke. And those people tried to sue me for slander. So all the money I make selling my artwork, modeling, acting goes to lawyers because these people are so corrupt. They paid off corrupt lawyers like Aaron Filler to physically harm me. He was paid to give me that brain injury. It took me 7 years to recover.
Absolutely horrific.
Yes,
And
it's horrifying.
so let's go back to Greenwich Street, where
Yeah.
you began encountering Harvey Weinstein. You said he started to have eyes for you, passing you back and forth. How long did that last before he began literally raping you and committing crime against you?
Well, I think the grooming happened, like I explained, the apartments. The
Yeah.
3B was rented to Miramax, and this was the age I did the Cider House Rules. So they spied on me, and if there's a proper investigation, what I think the DA in New York should do is interview Harvey Weinstein and get him to give up Judith. To me, Judith Bruce is a lot more dangerous than Harvey Weinstein. Oh, yes. Judith Bruce, I'm going to say it for the record. Judith Bruce is a lot more dangerous than Harvey Weinstein. You know, if you look closely at interviews of me during that time, when they told me Weinstein was behind bars, they say, and I can't stop crying and I don't know why. Why? Because the person who's much more dangerous was not behind bars, and she's still not behind bars. So, yes, they made porn. They certainly made porn. They certainly made porn, and I'm sure if they investigate, if they interview Weinstein and he were to give up Judith, I mean, not that I trust Weinstein either. I'm not saying he's a good person. He's evil, but she's more evil. Um,
And so these were recorded, the assaults that you went through.
no, I haven't seen the videos. I'm saying, knowing what I know now and what I remember, and just, this is not normal. You have a see-through glass door, blinds on the opposite side, rented to a grown man who works for Miramax, looking into a beautiful 13-year-old girl going through puberty. You have a perfect view of her looking into a standing mirror. Okay, like, what were they doing? We're doing something, so
Yeah.
there has to be an investigation.
Absolutely. Yes.
So that's when it started, right? He
Yeah.
wouldn't finally rate me until 2010, because that was the second season of Boardwalk. And you have to understand, Judith, CRM management, all these people had total control over my life. The doctors I saw, the therapists. So they convinced one of many corrupt therapists to convince me to move back into the 3C apartment where he had spied on me as a child. And that happened the second season of Boardwalk. And that's when he would rate me twice. Judith was just on the other side of the wall, but I couldn't scream for help. She knew exactly who was in there and what he was doing. She put him there.
And they put you in such a vulnerable spot by abusing you your whole life. You couldn't ever scream out for help. You didn't have anybody to help you.
No, I couldn't. I had a horrible time in school. I am very smart. A lot of people were jealous. A lot of the kids wanted to be actresses. A lot of they were like, oh, she's already in movies. But they didn't realize that I wasn't happy. I was suffering. Nobody gave a shit about me. My own family didn't. I was, terribly bullied. I'm only now, as I've gotten away from these evil people, started to heal and make meaningful relationships in my life. I think, in all honesty, the only kind of relationships I had in my life that protected me were my boyfriends, actually. And they were jealous of that. I attracted some very high profile men, Jack Nicholson, a number of them. And that just made them more jealous. So, but yes, at least they tried to protect me, you know, at least they didn't, couldn't believe trying to figure out what was going on. Or like Michael Rebel, who tried to protect me. But I would say, my boyfriends, the men that I wanted to be with, all the kind of handlers, they were always these women who didn't have boyfriends, who weren't very pretty. And I just weren't pretty. When I talk about beauty, beauty is in her. You know, I mean, even my book agent says I was crucified for my sexuality, quite literally.
Yes, and used as a human sacrifice in so many
Yeah,
ways with
I
all
was
the
a sacrifice. I don't know if you've seen the footage of the truck hitting me. That should have killed me. I had a spiritual experience. 300 milligrams of Seroquel, that should have killed me. I've read off the list of medications they have me on. That should have killed me. And I've survived a number of assassination attempts. Yes, I was a sacrifice.
And even I remember you were saying as an infant or a very, very small child, you even had a major surgery done on you without any anesthesia or pain medication.
Correct. Yeah, I have a huge scar here. And Judith wants to say it was something called a cystohygroma, right? No. Whatever it wasn't that. You know, as infants, babies can feel pain, okay? They operated me on 20 days old without anesthesia. That must have put my body into shock. I was subjected to all kinds of strange tortures, like in my teeth, and Judith is not a beautiful woman, and she was jealous of the way I looked. I mean, she would want me to dye my hair blonde so that so I looked like her, you know. I remember, like, I got my teeth back normal and I have my gap now. At one point, they put these horrible caps on me and gave me like a buck tooth. And because of the surgery at 20 days old, my right breast didn't grow incorrectly. And instead of getting me like a proper boob job, it was all a humiliation ritual. It was whatever to make me feel bad about myself, because this woman must hate herself so much. Yeah. Just like from, putting, I have no, just horrible things that you can't imagine. My life was all a humiliation. ritual until I got safe.
I'm so sorry. I can't even imagine what that would be like. You know, I didn't have an absolutely perfect childhood, but just imagining you as a small child, you're such an incredibly beautiful inside out woman now, and you are so talented. And just to think of anybody wanting to hurt that spirit in you that you still have, and that you never let go of being a loving, caring, compassionate person and wanting to do the right thing, despite literally having not a single example around you of anybody doing the right thing. You had to be the adult in your life. You had to be the
Yeah,
mother that
you know,
nurtured
I will say, in spite of all this cruelty I've been shown, I have never lost my pure heart. You
ever.
know, what I have now is wisdom, which is different. Wisdom is good. You know, my old therapist Michael would say to me, you know, you weathered the storm, you can have any life you want, right? So, you know, I don't see many people by choice. One, I don't trust many people. When I have, you know, these depraved people offering film companies, lawyers money to harm me, when I've seen what anyone will do in the world for a dime, it's been really hard for me to trust people. I live on a farm with my animals. And then I also just found that, you know, oh, you can't imagine. I mean, Jane Fonda was at my mother's 50th birthday, right? This is supposed to be an activist. And I remember I had been hanging out with Jack Nicholson, and she said, "Oh, he won't protect you." Can you imagine? And she told me I wasn't healing fast enough when I was being trafficked to Weinstein. And I had reached out to these different people at certain points. And, you know, I've made sure to put everything in writing, you know, almost offering olive branches. Like, her son told me she had cancer. I said, "Oh, I know someone that can help her." And he goes, "No, there's nothing here for you." I'm like, "Well, what did I do?" I'm like, "Your mother was so cruel to me." And who am I supposed to look for protection when these women, these so-called activists, were bullied? They're bullies. They bullied me.
Do you think Judith uses the women's rights alleged passion that she has as a cover? Because
Yeah, yes, it's a cover-up. And I think she traffics other girls. I've been speaking with Ryan. I think she's a global trafficker. If you look at her Twitter, it's really weird. It says like girls for all seasons, right? Like, it sounds like she's selling girls. I was certainly sold. I have all the evidence to prove it. You know, as a grown up until what, 5 years? I just turned 41. I've 34. I got up 36 years old. I mean, this woman. I mean, I want the police to get on with it. Put these people behind bars. This is so horrifying what I've been through, and I need to be financially compensated. I want
absolutely,
to buy a few homes and I want to have my babies. You know, I've been hiding in a country for my safety. I have high security, everything. I can't be too safe. You know, why couldn't they just leave me alone? You know, a lot of, you know, I have a lot of, you know, beautiful female friends that weren't abused by their parents or exploited in the way I have been. You know, you don't have, just because you're beautiful doesn't mean you have to be raped, you know. Yes, you know, I mean, Brigitte Bardot is, I really like her. You know, she loved animals like us. You know, that's pure love. You know, unfortunately, there are a lot of depraved, insecure people out there. You know, what I am is a mirrored empath. I'm not a narcissist. I'm a mirrored empath, you know, and, you know, it exposes people's true colors. And if they don't like what they see about themselves, you become an immediate threat to them and they want to hurt you.
and so let's go back to that first assault. What happened after Harvey left that day? Did you even attempt to tell your mother, or what did you do after that happened?
No, I was so frightened. I think I had a mental breakdown. And
Oh,
I was still filming the second series. And I remember the second series of Boardwalk Empire. I had done so well in the first season that Tim Van Patten, who I actually really like, wanted to build the second season around me, you know, and I couldn't deal. I was dealing with constant harassment. And I will note during that time, yes, I got into drugs. I got into drugs because I was being horribly exploited, and I had to deal with the pain somehow.
It's so
And not,
consistent with survivors. That's a huge outlet that they end up taking because nobody will help them, not even therapists, not even churches. They can't walk into a church and talk about their abuse. They're shunned out, and it's too much for the pastor to even listen to. And so
well,
that's
I
what
had,
that's
yeah.
what they have to turn to, or how do you, manage that? Drugs are a way that a lot of people choose to when you're just in such despair, and a lot of like you, a lot of these children too are drugged their whole life. They're
Yeah,
conditioned.
my mother, they started, taking me to corrupt psychiatrists very young,
Oh,
that put me on Ritalin, Adderall, or, you know, um, benzodiazepines, none of these things are good for you. And no child should be subjected to those things. A child deserves safety, love, protection. I had none of those things. And then even at my attempt at a career, I was being deceived.
yes.
They were stealing from me. They were using for me. So it was all just. So after the first assault, when he actually raped me, I fell into a downward spiral. Sorry, yeah, yeah. I fell apart, and then my behavior on set at Boardwalk Empire started becoming very erratic. I remember Tim Van Patten once pulling me into a dress room and kind of shaking me, being like, "What's going on?"
Oh.
And I was too frightened to say anything.
And so what happens after all this?
After this, I got fired. I got fired. No, then he would rape me again because he wanted to keep coming back for more. And he would even sit in the lobby at Greenwich Street.
Oh my
Oh, he
God.
would just sit there. He knew where I lived. He knew the place because he watched me grow up there. And he would sit there. And I know the doorman that was there. His name was Raymond. I even called since I got safe because my friend Steve's, I won't name it, he wants to remain anonymous, wrote a statement, saying that Judith offered him money to spy on me. And when he refused, she got very angry and he moved out. So this spying on me thing started very young. And everyone took the money but a couple of people. And when I finally got safe, I made a point of making all those spies write statements
Good for
and
you.
printing them out. And I
Good
have
for
that
you.
book, But
Yeah.
I will just say, um, yeah, it's horrible. Yeah, I I had no safety. I think Tim Van Patten, who worked on the show, knew something was terribly wrong. But I was too frightened. I was dealing with constant people constantly intimidating me, trying to scare me. And I
Yeah.
went to one journalist, Alexis Lass, and I actually have her transcription. And I started to tell her what was going on. And then I think he found out about that and I got fired. And then came Nurse 3D, which was the whole movie was blackmail and an assassination attempt, the first one.
And talk about that because that was a huge event in your life, not just because the initial trauma of that happening to you, but that was actually, it caused an extreme injury for you too. That,
Oh, I mean, to say, did I suffer? Oh, yes, I
oh,
suffered. Oh, I suffered a lot. Um, how was that? I didn't want to make the movie. I read the script. I thought it was awful. I remember, I have memories of like Tim seeing me and just knowing when I had been let go from Boardwalk Empire. It was almost like he was grieving me already, like she's not going to make it. And I didn't want to do that movie. And my manager, Evan Haney, and Katie Rhodes said, "Oh, do it. It's a lot of money, $500,000. I think that's how much," which Judith stole and CRM management. And I need, please mention, I have this fundraiser. I need to file this year because I only discovered that fraud 6 years ago, not 6 years ago yet. So 2022, 4 years ago. I really have to get on it. That's why, and most lawyers need a retainer for such a big case. Yeah, thank you, honey. So, what can I say? Um, I remember that summer in New York. I just felt so lost. I felt so lost, and yes, my drug use probably went up, and I had like handlers around me, like Goldie Sammy, and this woman, everyone around her dies. She would tell me things like, "Oh, heroin is your medicine." And even when I made attempts at getting clean, she would give me drugs. And I
Oh,
don't think I was the only victim of her. Michael Kenneth Williams died a few years ago. I had introduced them. I mean, this girl's like a drug pusher, assassin. And she came to the set of Nurse 3D. And when I arrived, I was told I could rewrite the script. So, I do this movie, I get there, and this guy, Doug Arianovsky, he was like a bodybuilder, just a really like a total, I don't even know, how can you even, this another depraved person. And when I get there and I'm like, "Oh, do you have my new script?" He like presented the first copy. And I remember I was speaking to my managers and I just had a very bad feeling. And I said, "I don't want to make this movie. It doesn't feel safe." And my acting coach at the time said these words to me. She said, "This movie isn't worth your life, you know?" And I literally tried to get out of it. And I was threatened with blackmail. They told me if I didn't make the movie, they were going to blacklist me from Hollywood and tell everyone I was a drug addict. Oh, yeah. I
oh
was
my God.
blackmailed.
And how old were you during the time that
Well, I mean, during this, it was, 27? What
oh
an
my
age
God.
I should have died, right? So I do the movie, and the whole film was just constant verbal abuse from the director, just bullying, screaming at me. There was a lot of action scenes, and I didn't know how to deal. It was, I don't doubt that, now that I know things, this was an assassination attempt because they knew I had spoken, not just by Weinstein, but by my mother. And I recorded Baxter Mary, the first AD who called me. And he gave an honest statement, and I recorded it because he gets scared. He'll go away, he'll come back. He will testify that, you know, they had Judith come to set, and I wanted to get out, and she said I had to finish the film. She didn't care if I was dead or not. She never did. This woman wanted me to be dead. And I will note the accident was October 15th, and it was pouring rain, and this was like a very small hallway, and you have this ambulance truck, and they had fake rain, and I'm wearing high heels and an umbrella. And the first take, the ambulance just sort of skid my arm. The second, and I didn't want to go the second take. I was frightened, and so was Katrina, the other actress. But they kept pressuring me the whole film. They were bullying me.
And then
I
they
was
were
like,
reassuring you that the person that's driving, they're a professional, you don't have anything to worry
yeah,
about.
exactly. But I mean, I didn't want to do the movie to begin with. And then the second take, it clips me. The rear view mirror takes a hold of the umbrella and dragged my body 10 feet, and I fell flat on my back. I was flung in the air, and I had like a spiritual experience, like I died. I saw my innate. And I saw actually how beautiful I was. I thought, oh my God. And it was the first time I wanted to live. And then I remember waking up and all these people around me, and it was really weird. Maybe a couple of people cared, but most didn't. And then I looked and I saw Doug Arianovsky, and I stood up, and it was like he was upset I wasn't dead. And then I told someone that I wanted to go to the hospital, and then they called Goalie. And then Goalie comes and she says, you can't go to the hospital. So what do you mean? She goes, you can't go to the hospital because they'll find drugs in your system. Whether I had drugs in my system or not, it's irrelevant. I was just slammed by a fucking ambulance and should have died. And I should have gone to the hospital. Baxter Mary says that in his statement, which I recorded. And then she said, no, you got to do another take. So not only did they not take me to a hospital, they made me go again. And she said, come with me. And she took me behind a curtain and gave me drugs. And then I remember sitting in the bathtub and my body was black. And I didn't know what to do. And I couldn't turn to anyone to protect me because they were the people who had orchestrated it all.
So horrific. Oh my gosh. I can't even imagine.
Oh yeah, it was a hit. It was the first hit on my life. And
Especially
now you have
that intuition of already knowing, you went into it knowing something's, this isn't right.
I knew it was coming.
Everybody's forcing
it would be a dead. It was yeah. I wanted out. I didn't want to do it. And even my acting coach, she said, this film is not worth your life. And I tried to get out, and it was blackmail. The whole movie was blackmail.
And so what happens after this? It seems like your mom, she not only had these relationships behind the scenes that you didn't know about, but it seems like she was really sort of infiltrating your work life too, and in cahoots with people.
Yeah, everything with the money, people, everything. So then, I was in pain. I was in a lot of physical pain. I had fractured a tailbone, which was hitting a nerve. But I also had been on pills, and I went to Antigua to detox. But when I detoxed, I only detoxed to realize I had medical problems. Okay, so here we go again. There's a difference between being a drug addict, injured, and crazy. Now I was injured and in dire physical pain and actually needed pain pills until they figured out the pain problem, right? And Goalie would come to Antigua and try to give me drugs. And then my life took on a whole nightmare. Even after being injured, she made me homeless. Oh yeah, it gets worse. I had nowhere to go. She told me Christmas Day that she was raising my rent in the 3C apartment where I had, been raped by Weinstein for a second time. Here I am fighting for my life, and I'm homeless. So then my life became a series of doctor's appointments, and then nasty Carrie Malcolm. None of these people had any conscience that I was a human being. They dehumanized me. They dehumanized me. I remember around this time the Lana Del Rey video came out, and I believe Marty Singer had been my lawyer at this time, and he told me I should sue Lana Del Rey. But I was in the hospital fighting for my life. I said, first of all, I don't have money to give you to sue her, and I'm fighting for my life. I have bigger problems. Oh, if a real journalist delves into this, I was a sacrifice. This was an assassination attempt. Maybe Lana Del Rey wanted to steal my identity and be me. I don't know. I don't think any of these people thought I would ever live to tell my story. And I'm not mad at Lana now that I've survived all this. Well, I've asked in a TikTok video if I'm her Marilyn Monroe, she should support me, right? When anyone has witnessed what I have in my life, which is humanity at its worst, things like fame and fortune do not impress me. I am devoutly Christian. In my darkest hours, I devoted my life to scripture and spiritual practice. There are some celebrities that have good values, like there are some, you know. I've met everyone. And honestly, unless you come from a place of, values, I'm not interested. I'm just not interested.
Well, and you
I
were
was,
around so many people that were beautiful all the time, and you saw right through it. You saw the ugliness behind that facade.
yeah, I believe in inner beauty. I am not, I've never touched my face. That's one thing. But I'm not against it. I'm not against people that do, as long as they have good hearts. I remember after I had been in the hospital 2.5 years, I ran into Lana at the Chateau Marmont. And I said, well, why did you do that to me? And she said, because you're my Marilyn. I said, well, why didn't you? I said, did you know I'd been struck by a truck and I've been in the hospital for 2.5 years fighting for my life? She goes, yes. And I said, well, why didn't you send me flowers? She kind of looked at me and then she said, do you want me to cut you out of the video? I said, no, I don't want you to cut me out of the video. Maybe we could do a singing project. And, I'm all for making peace with Lana. If Lana, now that I'm safe and well, wants to, one, support my justice, two, do a musical project. I love singing. I'm open to that. What I'm not into is people exploiting people.
And for people who might not have seen that video, could you just give a little recap of what happened?
Yes. So that night at the chateau, mind you, I had just been to a journalist about Weinstein. It was the Golden Globes. I was in the process of, I told you I'm open that during that time I had been using drugs. And I had gotten on a medication, which is a opiate blocker called Suboxone, right? This is a medication which you should not drink on. You understand?
Yeah.
And I'll break down that night and what's really happening in that video, and then let's end it for today. So I had gone to the party, and oh yeah, Katie Rhodes was my manager. She picked me up, and I was very clear that I, was on this medication to help with my opiate addiction, and I didn't want to drink. All of a sudden, she starts putting whiskey in front of me. Now, to do that to a recovering addict is really not nice. And it all felt like a setup. So I started drinking this. And when you mix that with Suboxone, that is a very dangerous combination. And I think we get to the after party of the Golden Globes, and I'm, feeling a little high or whatever, and I'm traumatized, and I just went to a journalist, and the whole night was another humiliation ritual to gaslight me because they had known I'd gone to a journalist. And I remember there was a weird moment with Steve Buscemi and his wife. I think I kissed Steve on the cheek, and his wife got very angry. And then there was like an after party at the chateau that I wanted to go to. And Katie was with me, and I think they said I was too drunk. Now, anyone that knows the Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles knows that for celebrities, if they get too drunk, there is a backdoor exit. You understand? This is where it's all very revealing. Not only did my manager, whose job is to take care of me, I am her client, she did not take me out the back door. She puts me on Sunset. A car rolls up, and you hear in the background, Paz, get in the car, get in the car. So she's telling me to get in the car, but she's not taking me home. All of a sudden, she's gone, the car's gone. This is weird. This is not right. This is a setup. And I'm on the Sunset Boulevard, wasted, more than wasted, because I'm on a lethal combination because she was giving me alcohol when you should not be drinking on the medication I was taking, which I was aware of and I did not want to drink. I could have died. And nobody wanted to help me. Paparazzi swarming, and in comes a guy named Dimitri, who is an angel. So here we have a good person, right? And he took me back to where I was staying. And that's what happened. And then I was, the next day it was all in the news and whatever. And I remember the woman who designed my dress wanted me to pay for the tears. And of course, I was very sick because that kind of combination is terrible. And then I remember there was talk at HBO that they wanted to let me go, but Tim Van Patten, there will now and then be good people that come in. Tim really, he thought it was kind of glamorous and cool, and he wanted me to stay on the show. So let's end there. That was what happened.
So then she made a music video mocking it, essentially.
Well, who knows? I mean,
maybe not per her, but direct.
Well, if I'm her Marilyn, then that was a very Marilyn moment. But, we got to be kinder to people we admire.
You're right. Yes. Yeah. And you're such just a blazing example of kindness and love and just overcoming the impossible and doing it in a way that you're not out there trying to destroy people. You're trying to do the right thing.
I'm not trying to destroy anyone. I honestly, there are certain people who cross too many boundaries with me, and I wish that I had gotten angry a lot sooner. But my anger is not bitter; it's righteous. In the Bible, that God sees everything, and God gets angry too. They call it the wrath of God. So yeah, justice needs to be served, and things need to be put in their divine order. Judith needs to go to jail. Christina and my father, and those people who managed my money, and all the handlers. The police better do it fast. They really, that corrupt lawyer, Dr. Aaron Filler, the world needs to know that you can't hit people with trucks. You can't drug people. You can't steal from people. You can't give people brain injuries. Yes. You can't rape your own fucking daughter with a knife. You can't send people death threats. These things are not okay. And I was dehumanized forever, maybe to the point that I have been crucified, and maybe I am an angel. But angels need protection too. So as my story gets more known, I am looking for good people, people who have values, who understand that what I have been through is morally wrong.
And you mentioned Aaron Filler. That'll be a story we'll get into next time. Paz is on for a part 2. But before we wrap up for today, do you want to just remind people of your fundraiser, where they can find it, and then where they can connect with you on social media?
Yeah, my fundraiser, there's a link on my TikTok. Please donate. I have a lot of legal expenses. I have a Spanish penalist for the trafficking that happened 5 years ago. I just recently paid the first part, and only recently have I stopped receiving death threats. This is not for anything frivolous. The other retainer is for a New York civil lawyer, so I can get moving on the conspiracy fraud and do my best to recover the millions they stole alone. And without being able to afford the retainers for my lawyers, it makes me too vulnerable, because I'm trying to put powerful exploiters behind bars. And in the past, they've paid off every lawyer. So this is really important. And, there are some things that, due to the statute of limitations, I can't sue for, like the brain injury. I only had a year after that happened, but I will file a police report. And then other things like stolen art. They stole a lot of paintings from mine. My art sells for a lot of money. And, you know, just resources to heal. I'm blessed that I have a very good therapist who without him I'd be dead. And, you know, I hope that 2026, I want a more normal life. I don't want to live in hiding anymore. You know, as much as I love this farm has been very good to me. I work, so it's not like I don't work. I'm either painting, modeling, or acting. It's a miracle I'm able, you know, I'm an artist. I will always create. So, but you know, these lawyers are expensive, and I
Yes.
deserve to see my justice.
And not only that, but the people that abused you, we know that abusers don't typically just abuse one person. You know, we could potentially be stopping a lot of other
Oh,
people.
yes. Oh, let me just note, this is important. Because of these podcasts I have been doing recently, another victim of one of Judith and Christina's main traffickers, Marcus Anderson, yes, you're right. She came forward and found me, and he's been in jail in the Bronx, and he still wants to hurt me. And, you know, I've told the police in New York where he is and how to find him. And I'm hoping he will give up Judith and Christina because he was very well aware of their evil plans for me. And yes, you are right. There are other victims. So she was a victim. And we speak all the time now. Yeah.
There's no whistleblowers that come forward simply because of them. It's to put a stop to evil that is systemic and that is affecting a lot of people, not just one person. In Paz's life, you can see just the circle around her of people that should have been protecting her. Everybody that should have been protecting her wasn't. So I would really appreciate if you guys could go to her GoFundMe. I would love if she could get her memoir out. That's not a cheap fee either, especially if
No, no. I mean, there are so many people that don't want this book to come out. But I asked that, you know, I'm working on like a documentary with Sebastian Fena. He's not afraid. You know, he's written statements against my mother. I asked that people be as brave as I am. I've been so incredibly brave. So, you know, I want my story told. I want my real story told. All of it.
all of it, and
They
to pay
tried
for
they
lawyers.
tried to erase me. They tried to erase me. And when I say erase, I mean euthanize, quite literally.
And let me
And
just
I'm
close
like,
this by saying the
yep.
little girl that you once were that needed protection,
Oh,
that needed help, she's smiling at you today. She is so
thanks. I get
amazing
emotional
woman.
because I've been through so much. You can't imagine. And I just want a more normal life and the ability to heal properly from these horrible things.
You deserve that. You haven't even had a break. You might be safe now, but you still have to worry about them walking the streets and not having justice or knowing what's going to happen next. That's such a horrible feeling to just always carry with you.
Thank you.
You
But I
absolutely
really appreciate what you're doing for other victims, and you know, it's good. It's good. We have to speak out because, you know, it's gotta stop. And I think the world is ready for the truth.
And we're going to get there with fearless leaders and role models and courageous whistleblowers and
And you know,
survivors.
my dream, it's so cute. Molly, the other victim of Marcus who found me, she's like, I want to start orphanages with you and make children smile. And that's my
Oh,
dream too.
and that's how we turn.
Already with very little resources, I've helped a lot of victims recover their lives, get safe, get sober. You know, I took that plant, Iboga, which, you know, recalibrated my brain and made me piece together all the events and who wanted to hurt me and why and run away. So, I've used what I've survived to help others.
And for people who
And
do
I
want to
can,
actually
and if
reach
I
out,
have the financial resources, I would love to create orphanages. That would be a dream.
that'd be amazing. And if there's
Yeah.
people listening that would maybe want to help assist in any way aside from your fundraiser, your TikTok is probably the best place to get a hold of you, right?
Yeah, you can DM me, and you know, help comes in all ways. I work, I sell my paintings, acting. You know, Judith's very manipulative. She wants to know anyone who's in my life. That's off the record. You know, these are Satanists. You know, my manager saw the bruises on my body 5 years ago, knew I was being abused, and said he wanted to help me. You know, there are some people that do have morals that can't be bought. So that I'm grateful for.
Me too.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to share your TikTok just one more time for people. So it's just her name. If you just type her name in, it comes up right away. Please go reach out to her and support her, share her videos, comment, help elevate. This type of content also gets very suppressed. They don't want voices like Paz's to be heard. So if you guys could please help her and support her on social media, that would mean the world to us as well. And so Paz, just thank you for coming on and sharing. I know that this stuff is so painful to talk about constantly, and you've been doing it for years, but somebody on the other side of the screen needed this.
I want nothing more, you know. I mean, it's cost me a fortune. Even when I removed Aaron Filler and took the Weinstein settlement to get safe, I rented an apartment in Madrid, but Judith was paying total thugs to try to find me to falsely incarcerate me. So I couldn't even stay in my own apartment. I mean, this has all cost me a fortune. And I want, and it has to end. I deserve once and for all to see all retribution. You know, and any, you know, let alone, you know, I've been living in a country, I don't want to say where, but it's not like I have many friends here. I'm here primarily for my safety. And I knew they would make my life hell the last 5 years. I mean, these people have no conscience, not even offering to buy my silence, you know, which I think they attempted in 2019, but I said I wouldn't take less than 10. They stole more money than that. You know, and, you know, I think there's a saying about karma. You know, I don't think I would accept any money to be quiet, because what I've been through is so morally wrong that they have to pay. They have to pay. And that's it. They have to pay for my safety, for other people's safety, and because I deserve to be happy and to live in peace the rest of my life. You know, I want to have a child. I mean, they murdered 2 kids of mine alone. Oh yeah, Judith forced me to have an abortion with my first child, and they paid an assistant to poison me when I was pregnant with my second child. They wanted to erase me. Well, they didn't, and you're not going to erase me. No.
They picked the wrong girl who grew up into the wrong woman to pick on, and you've literally, everything that they've thrown at you, you have plowed over, you know, and it's just amazing. You are a miracle that you're standing here today, and I look forward to continuing your story last time, and I'm just very honored that we got to listen and learn from you today, and hopefully this is one step closer to getting the justice and peace that you finally deserve, and all the other victims who have been terrorized and victimized and abused by these people. So thank you, Paz.
And I want to thank you for your compassion and also your education on these matters. I'm impressed. Yeah.
It's the least that any of us could do. If we didn't live it, the least we can do is learn about it and help stop it. You know, one child being hurt is one child too many. So they're all our children. So I hope to be an inspiration that people.
I'll show you one of my paintings before we go. We leave on a
love that.
Yeah, this is a guy I was seeing him as Enki. I'm going to have a show. I don't want to say where yet because for my safety.
Thank you for sharing.
This is Aphrodite.
Oh my gosh, you're so talented. I love that you have all of your art around you. That's so awesome.
Yeah, and my Christmas tree is still up. Well, Emma, thank you so much. I have to rest now, but
and thank you.
Let's organize the next one soon.
Absolutely. And so you guys, I'll have this information below. I'll have all my information below. Thank you all for listening. God bless you all, and we will see you next time.